Hi, this week we are going to talk a little bit about teaching and assessing reading. So this is just a mini lecture on these two aspects, teaching and assessing reading. Now I want to talk about reading based on some different categories. There's three different types of reading I'm going to explain. The first is perceptive reading. And this is where we're looking at students' ability to recognize things like alphabetical symbols. So do they recognize the different letters of the alphabet? And for example, if they're instructed to decide if the words are the same or different, led or let, they can recognize the difference between the D and the T. And so these are the sorts of things of getting them to recognize the difference between the different symbols. So this is an important thing. Also recognizing the difference between capitals and lowercase letters. Recognizing the difference in purpose between punctuation. So what happens when there's a full stop? We often pause, or a comma, we pause. What happens when we have an exclamation point? So these sorts of things help. Not only, an exclamation point provides some meaning as well by saying that, obviously these words there's some excitement behind them. And so these are things that are really important for them to perceive and to understand. And then obviously words, seeing that each word is I guess, a bit of meaning, and each word is separate. They are separated by a space and so on. And being able to perceive the relationship between the written and the sound. So grapheme and phoneme. So this is really helpful. There's a lot of online books, and there's a program called Wooshka. And in Wooshka, students can actually hear the book play, and it actually shows which word, like it highlights the word as it goes on. So children or students are able to hear the word and actually see what the written word is. So making that connection between the written and the sound. We also do things like an activity where you say a word and the students have to point to the word that they hear. Then there's intensive reading. Now, intensive reading is usually directed by the teacher, and the teacher usually chooses what they are intensely reading. So for example, one area for getting students to look at a particular part of reading is reading for a purpose. So maybe they have to look for the meaning, or the gist, we often say. And this is the idea that students can skim a text. Now, skimming is the idea that you do this quite quickly. You're not looking at every single word, but you're looking at general meaning. What's the general ideas? What are the key points? Skimming a text. Then the other thing is looking for finding specific details. So that's what we call scanning a text. So for example, if you are looking at a catalog and you just want to know what price shoes cost, then you're only looking for the number or the price for those items. So you're actually looking for specific details. And then inference, so what is meant by certain words? When someone says something, what is actually meant by it? And this is more difficult, but it's an important part of getting students to think about, well, what is the speaker actually trying to say through these words that they're using? Oftentimes we talk about the reading process, and we talk about things that we do before and during and so on. Now, before reading, I think it's really important for students to know what they are looking for. So are they looking for the main ideas, or are they looking for specific information? So it's really important to, before students do a reading task, for you to direct the students in knowing what they are looking for. This also kind of gets them focused as well. And then we have things like speculating or predicting. Now, these are really important skills. So before you read a book, maybe looking at the cover, looking at the pictures, looking at the headings, to try to think about what it might be like, what it might be about. And we talk about the schema, and that's the idea of we connect to the things that we already know. So, and this is a real cognitive process of linking to what our brain can already process, finding some space for students to decode or understand the new things that they're going to read. So by predicting, you're getting the students to focus their attention on a particular topic. So if you're looking at the cover, for example, or the picture, it helps them kind of think about what the book might be. And if they're reading and they actually know the word, in oral speech, for example, if they know the topic, they might be able to guess a word in context. So this is a really powerful way to get students focused in on reading. Also, it's an important skill for students to kind of look at the pictures, have a quick look at the words to assess the difficulty level. One of the things that often students do is they read things that are too difficult and then they get really frustrated. So it's really important that we teach our students ways to assess whether the book is at their level. One of the things that we use in primary school is we have the five fingers on our hand. So if on one page there are 5 words that you don't know, it's probably too difficult. So that's just one little kind of way to think about, is this too difficult? Because if I don't know more than 5 words on this one page, then maybe it's not the right level for me. There's a lot of things that we do during the text, so interacting with the text. And this is, when we talk about communicative language teaching, interaction doesn't necessarily always have to be just speaking, but interacting with the text. Do they highlight words? Do they circle them? Do they ask questions as they go through? Do they ask questions about, I wonder what that is? Or do they underline words that they don't know that they might need to go back to? And then what do they do when they don't know a word? Do they skip it? Do they try to guess it based on context? Do they look it up in a dictionary? These are all things that we need to kind of guide students in knowing what they do when they don't know a word. An example of this is that with my child reading in his first language, sometimes, now that he's trying to read more independently, he gets worried about, well, what if I don't know a word? What do I do? And so I've realized I really need to show him what he could do when he doesn't know the word. So he has to learn these strategies. Things like looking at the other words, looking at the pictures, getting some visual cues. So the visual cues, so looking at the picture, what could it be? Then get linguistic cues. Looking at, maybe it's an adjective, so looking at the word that it might be describing. What could it be? Getting different ideas like this. And then, these are all part of kind of helping them know what to do when there's a word, or simply just writing down the word and coming back to it later. But the important thing is to review the words that they don't know so that they can learn through that process. One of the things that my personal thing is, I know teachers like to have students read in class. And I don't, I remember my teachers using this where we would read aloud a text. And I remember getting very nervous about making errors. So reading aloud can be helpful and can be a strategy, but I would suggest not use it too much because it can give a lot of anxiety for students, because if they skip on certain words or they don't say it correctly, there's a lot of kind of shame in not knowing the word. And I even remember we used to have to read in my history class in year 7. We'd have to read the textbook, but each person would read a paragraph. And I remember I would count to find out where in the line I would go. And I would read over and over to make sure that I wouldn't look silly in front of my friends. So just be careful of how you use reading aloud in your class. The other thing is, when you have students read a text in the classroom, it can be very difficult when there are some really strong readers and then there are slow readers. If you wait too long, then the strong readers get quite bored unless you've already given them an activity that they can do during that time. And the slow readers, if we hurry them along, they already feel lost and they go into the activity or the quiz or whatever it is feeling really anxious. So these are just some things to think about. Again, these are just some activities that you can use to get students to do activities after they read something. So obviously discussing with others and being able to locate particular information in the text. Where does it talk about, where does it introduce the characters? When does the problem occur in the narrative? Things like this. So getting them to locate things in the text. I like to use little post-it notes, so the colorful post-it notes, and get them to stick in where the main events happen. transferring ideas. So being able to take the ideas and create a picture, or if it's an information book, create a graph. So transferring their ideas from the reading that they've done to something else. Now, I've written down later things like a debate or a role play or a letter. So being able to read something and then either write about it, to be able to do a role play or something, create something based on their ideas. So they're transferring their ideas. There's retelling of the story. Being able to retell the story in their own words is a really important skill. Obviously, there's a wide variety of different activities and questions you can ask as a whole class or as in pairs or groups. And one of the things that I've used here is a reading wheel. And the idea of the reading wheel is that you would have, they could spin it and or throw dice on it or something, and then they have to have, if they're working in a pair or in a small group, they have to answer the question. So where does the story take place? So this is kind of creating a little game to get them to think about what they've read. There's also simple things of just getting them to think about the plus or the best thing, the thing that they didn't like about the story, and something interesting. Or talking about what happened in the beginning of the book, the middle of the book, and at the end of the book. So getting them to organize these ideas. For students that are reading more extended text, and particularly those that have an opinion or an argument, maybe it's it's trying to persuade you to think something or buy something, is interrogating the text. So this is where we're really getting them to think critically. So things like, do we actually believe with these arguments? Are they strong arguments? Well, why? And do these arguments, would they be the same in any other culture or context? So getting them to really think about the text, instead of just reading it, thinking about what they think about it and the strengths and the weaknesses of it. Then there's analytical reading, getting students to really look at the language structures. For example, using hedging words. So maybe, or showing an opinion. What are the kinds of words that help give meaning and that show, I believe that those things show opinion. So what kind of words are being used to convey meaning? I give you an example of, I think advertisements or signs are a very good way to look at this. And this is Uncle Sam. And this was when the U.S. Army was trying to get more people to join the Army. And I find this really interesting because Uncle Sam is this created figure of someone who's like, represents America. And it says, I want you for U.S. Army. So talking about things like, what is the message? Who is saying it? Look at what words are emphasized. Why wouldn't it say, we need people for the U.S. Army? Why is it said, I want you for the U.S. Army? How does that change the message? So getting them to really be analytical about what they're reading, thinking about what is the message, why is the message given, and these sorts of things. Now, thinking about testing techniques for reading, one of the things that is often used is multiple choice, and it's usually form focused. So some examples from Brown's book is he's not married, he's, and obviously you would have read from it that he's single, which is most likely. But these are the interesting things, is if they know grammatical sorts of things, they can probably have a good guess of what the answer is. But it's supposed to try to get them to focus on the form that is given in the book. So they can, if they know the form already, they probably can already answer the question. And then using some little scenarios. Do you like champagne? No, I can't. And so you're taking some of the language out of the reading and getting them to think about the language that is used. Then we have things like matching tasks. So you might have vocabulary matching. So on one side there is the vocabulary words, and on the other side there are the definitions, and they have to match them. Or you have fill in the blanks, and you can have words that they can choose from. So there's fill in the blanks of maybe something from the reading, and they have to put the words in. Or you don't have the words and they have to guess what the words are. Then you have editing tasks. So you take the text that they read and you change it to have some grammatical errors, and they have to edit the grammar. You have, this was a real good vocabulary one, where if you have a diagram, you label it. So for example, if you had a picture of a body and they had to name the different parts of the body. Close, we've talked a little bit about close tasks, and that's where you would take a part of the reading and you would take out every, let's say, 5th word or 7th word, and they have to try to put that word in there to see the flow of the language in there. And then of course there's things like short answers. So what do you think the main idea of this text is? To get an idea of their understanding, their comprehension. So extensive reading is the idea that we read for enjoyment. I think the important thing is that we really want students to love to read, and love to read in English. If they don't like reading in their L1, it's going to be hard to get them to like reading in their L2, but it has happened where they don't like, some students don't like reading in their L1 but really like reading in their L2. So we really want them to love reading, because the more that they read, the stronger vocabulary they will have and the better writer they will be. I think one of the things we need to do is provide a wide range of books that interest your students. So, you know, if you have the ability to have a little class library and students can take out books and borrow books, it's a great idea. But having access to a wide range of books that have a wide range of interests as well. Getting students to read every day and keep a journal about it and write about it. Having some regular time every day for independent reading, so just reading things that they want to read. And again, you know, just a love for books. One last slide I wanted to talk about is one of the things when we think about evaluating reading materials, we need to think of these things. So, do the materials present the content, like the ideas, facts, and data, clearly? So is it clear? Can this confuse our students? Is it clearly presented? Do the materials include knowledge and experience of my students? Because we want students to be able to link back to their own understanding and knowledge. And if we can kind of link back to some things that they know, they'll have probably a better reading experience. We need to evaluate the text in regards to lexical density. That's how many content words are given in a certain sentence. So if there are a lot of content words in one sentence, it's going to be very lexically dense. Does the text flow easily? Is it easy to read and understand? I'm sure you've read a number of research journals that you find it's very lexical dense. There's lots of words in one sentence and there's lots of content, difficult words, and then it really doesn't flow very easily. You have to go back and read again and again. And are there illustrations to support understanding if students don't understand? So one of the things you might think about is, what are some activities and or strategies you might use to help improve your students' access to the text? So sometimes we can really support students in thinking about how we can help them even before they read. Maybe it's providing some vocabulary words, doing a little activity to get them to understand some of the concepts, so when they read, it's much easier for them. So again, this was just a little mini lecture about reading. There's obviously a lot of different types of reading tests that you can use, and you can look at some of those, but we often, for reading, it tends to be comprehension questions in the form of multiple choice or short answer. But for in-class, you know, you can use a wide range of these different reading quizzes and ways to informally assess students' reading. Actually, one last thing, you know, many people use what's called a running record, and that's where students read aloud, but it's independently, and they tick off how many words they get right, and see, you know, how well they are reading the material and what level of reading they are reading at. So hopefully this was helpful. Have a lovely week, and we'll see you in tutorials next week, actually after the midterm break. All right, have a lovely day. Bye.